A piercing scream shattered the quiet afternoon of November 20, 1988. While hiking with his father in the dense woods near Willamette Bluffs Road in Silverton, Oregon, a young boy named Kyle spotted a dark shape in a shallow creek bed. Curious, he crept closer, only to realize it was a body, branches, and heavy stones piled on its chest, holding it beneath the murky water. Police rushed to the scene. When the body was pulled from the cold creek, a wallet was found in the back pocket, soaked but intact. The driver's license inside showed the smiling face of Marcus Hayes. There was no doubt it was the 19-year-old man who had vanished exactly 1 month earlier. The illusion of safety in Silverton was shattered forever. The faint hope that he had simply run away evaporated with that grim confirmation. For Marcus's family, the discovery reopened wounds that had never healed and brought to light a darker secret. Marcus had recently discovered his older brother, Leon, was entangled in a dangerous, high-stakes gambling debt, a secret that terrified him. For years, the murder of Marcus Hayes would haunt Oregon, a brutal reminder of a promising life cut far too short. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light, and it tells the algorithm you want to see more content just like this. Silverton, Oregon, in 1988 was a town that breathed in quiet rhythms, a place where time seemed to tick a little slower, preserving the comforting hum of small-town America. 90 miles south of Portland's growing sprawl, its population of 6,000 had remained largely unchanged, a testament to a steadfast way of life. Here, tree-lined streets led to the welcoming glow of mom-and-pop stores, the rich scent of pine mingling with coffee from the local diner. Kids, their laughter echoing freely, rode their bikes until the streetlights blinked on, their parents rarely giving it a second thought. Doors were often left unlocked, a silent pact of trust among neighbors who felt more like extended family. It was a sanctuary, a community so untouched by the harsh realities of the outside world that the idea of a local homicide felt like a forgotten ghost story. While thousands of murders cast a dark shadow across the United States that year, Silverton remained bathed in an illusion of enduring safety. Within this comforting bubble of normality lived Marcus Hayes. Born on July 12, 1969, to James and Eleanor, at 19, Marcus wasn't just a good kid, he attacked life with a quiet, focused ambition. A freshman at the local community college, his brilliance in math and science was aimed squarely at his dream of becoming an engineer. While many teenagers struggled with one job, Marcus juggled his classes with a part-time position as a cook at the Silverton diner, each shifting a deliberate stepping stone toward his singular goal. He was a pillar of the local church, a mentor to the younger kids, and a steady, grounding presence for his girlfriend, Sarah. Their relationship was the easy, comfortable kind, built on shared dreams and 2 years of history. Friday, October 14, 1988, dawned with the promise of autumn, a seemingly ordinary day that held an unseen precipice. Marcus hurried through his classes, his mind buzzing with anticipation of a movie date with Sarah. She was the bright spot in his often hectic world. He pictured the familiar, comforting routine, home to change, then the short, familiar drive to the diner for his 5 to 7 p.m. shift, followed by Sarah picking him up. He dressed quickly, pulling on comfortable blue jeans, sneakers, and a sweatshirt. Over it, he slipped on Sarah's green and gold high school letterman jacket, her name Sarah stitched in white cursive over the heart, a warm, tangible symbol of their connection. It was a jacket he wore often, a comforting weight on his shoulders. With a quick glance in the mirror, he grabbed his keys, his heart throbbing with youthful eagerness, and headed out the door. His old Toyota Celica idled to life, pulling away from the Hayes home, its taillights disappearing into the quiet afternoon, carrying Marcus toward his dreams and a fate no one in Silverton could have ever imagined. As Friday evening deepened into night, the comfortable rhythms of Silverton began to fray for the Hayes family. Sarah, her heart throbbing with youthful excitement for their movie date, arrived at Marcus's door at 7:30 p.m. But instead of Marcus's familiar smile, she was met by James Hayes's kind but furrowed brow. "He's not here, Sarah," James said, a hint of confusion in his voice. "We thought he'd be back from the diner by now." "Come on in, wait a bit." As the minutes stretched, then into an hour, the easy conversation in the living room grew thin, replaced by a tangible unease. Sarah, unable to shake a growing prickle of worry, called the diner, only for the phone to ring out into an empty silence. Where could he be, she wondered, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She and James then drove his car, the engine an insistent thrum against their rising anxiety, to the diner. They found Marcus's Toyota Celica gone, the building dark and locked, a chilling void where his vibrant presence should have been. Returning to the Hayes home, the air inside was thick with an unspoken dread. James and Eleanor, his mother, shared a look that spoke volumes. Marcus was meticulously reliable, a creature of habit. To alter plans without a word, especially for a date he'd anticipated all week, was utterly uncharacteristic. It simply wasn't Marcus. James, his voice tight, called Marcus's older brother, Leon, who lived across town with his wife, Chloe. Marcus sometimes helped Leon with projects, but Leon confirmed they hadn't seen or heard from him. Around 10 p.m., Marcus's younger sister, Maya, arrived home from a friend's house, stepping into an atmosphere so heavy it felt like a physical weight. The family's shared anxiety was a silent, suffocating presence. James and a tearful Sarah then made the agonizing trip to the Silverton Police Department, only to be met with a dismissive wave. "Look," a deputy said, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. 19-year-olds change their minds. He probably just went off with friends. Come back after 24 hours to file an official report. But for James and Eleanor, and for Sarah, every passing second was a lifetime of terror. The following morning, Saturday, October 15th, the sun rose over Silverton, but its light brought no comfort. Marcus's car remained missing. His bed was unslept in, a cold, empty expanse that screamed of absence. Unsure where else to turn, James and Eleanor began a desperate round of phone calls, reaching out to everyone they knew from their church and the community. The town, still operating on its bedrock of trust, responded with an outpouring of concern. A large search party quickly coalesced, a testament to Marcus's bright spirit. Friends, family, and even his college classmates, their usual youthful energy now focused by a grim determination, carpooled across Silverton, distributing flyers emblazoned with Marcus's smiling face to local businesses, each hand out a silent plea. Seeing the town mobilized, the police could no longer afford to remain detached. They issued a public appeal, asking for any information, any sighting of Marcus on the day of his disappearance. This plea yielded 2 independent calls, both providing a hauntingly similar image: a car in the diner's parking lot around 7 p.m., with 2 men in the front seats and a young black man matching Marcus's description standing outside. The young man, callers reported, appeared to be having what looked like a heated argument with one of the men. Police, ever logical, initially focused on Sarah, who had admitted they were supposed to meet. They brought her in for questioning. She reiterated her story, her voice strained with worry. She'd gone to his house, but he never showed. The diner was dark, locked. For now, police found no reason to doubt her genuine distress. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always fascinated to see how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. The very next day, a new chilling detail emerged. A tipster reported seeing an old Toyota Celica, Marcus's car, parked on the side of a secluded stretch of Willamette Bluffs Road, a logging route miles northeast of the diner. Deputy Nathan Reed was dispatched. What he found confirmed the dread that had been growing in Silverton's heart. Marcus's car sat unlocked, its keys still in the ignition, the driver's side door ajar as if someone had left in a hurry. His wallet lay on the passenger seat, a grim testament to a sudden departure, its contents spilled across the floor. The glove box was open. Outside the driver's side, a single, muddy footprint offered a small, unsettling clue. The hood of the car popped, suggesting a breakdown, but police knew Marcus would never have left his wallet behind if he'd walked for help. This isn't just a breakdown, Deputy Reed muttered to himself, his gaze sweeping the desolate road. This is a staged scene. When officers inspected under the hood, they found nothing amiss. The engine hummed to life instantly, and a mechanic later confirmed the car was in perfect working order. Someone had deliberately made it appear as if Marcus had broken down. Yet the scene offered no easy answers. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no DNA evidence. A search of the dents surrounding foliage yielded nothing. Marcus's parents were baffled by the car's location. He would never take that road, James insisted, especially not at night. Not when he was so excited to see Sarah. The puzzle pieces refused to fit. An evidence technician conducted a thorough examination, his trained eye searching for any trace of violence, but found no DNA, no blood, no physical evidence of foul play. He did note one perplexing detail: wet pine needles and clumps of dark mud on the passenger side floor mat, as if someone with muddy boots had sat there, unusual given that it hadn't rained that night. The silence of the car was deafening, a new, unsettling layer to the mystery. A small, glinting object in the open glove box caught an officer's eye, a cheap, silver-plated ring. For a brief moment, a fragile hope stirred among the investigators. Perhaps it was just a trinket. But Sarah quickly dispelled that hope. It wasn't Marcus's. She hesitated before identifying it, her voice trembling. The ring belonged to David Miller, a classmate Marcus was friends with, but whom Sarah had always found unsettlingly intense. David Miller, the name carried a faint echo of high school hallways. He had been a persistent shadow in Sarah's life, a childhood acquaintance who had long nursed an obsessive crush on her. Marcus, ever trusting and kind, had seen David's persistence as harmless, even befriending him in their shared college classes. But Sarah knew better. David barraged her with notes, accidentally showed up everywhere she was, begging her to leave Marcus. Sarah, however, had always gently but firmly rebuffed him, valuing Marcus's steady devotion and seeing David only as a troubled acquaintance. Now, the discovery of his ring, a misplaced relic in Marcus's glove box, introduced a fresh, unsettling layer of concern to Sarah's already spiraling dread. Detectives quickly tracked down David Miller. He was cooperative, perhaps too eager. He explained the ring's presence with a plausible story. He'd been helping Marcus with his car stereo a few weeks back, and the ring, getting in the way, had been placed in the glove box for safekeeping. He even boasted of being one of the first volunteers in the search, driving around county roads with one of Marcus's friends the day after he vanished. His eagerness, however, didn't erase the cold questions in the detectives' minds. Where had David been on the night of Marcus's disappearance? David provided an elaborate alibi. He claimed he'd been at a study group for his community college classes at a friend's house from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. Afterward, his friend Chad picked him up, and they'd just driven around until midnight before he finally returned home. The study group members, fellow classmates, surprisingly corroborated the story. Chad also confirmed picking him up. David's alibi seemed to hold. Yet a nagging unease persisted for the detectives. The investigative net widened, bringing in Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Kevin Johnson. He had a minor criminal record and a well-known temper, and he'd made no secret of his hatred for Marcus. He became a person of interest. To sift through the suspects, police had Sarah, David, and Kevin undergo polygraph tests. Sarah and David passed, but Kevin's test showed clear signs of deception. The detectives, tight-lipped, refused to release his name, but a new, unsettling question began to form in the troubled minds of Silverton's investigators. Who was this other person, and what were they hiding? 6 days bled into an agonizing week, each passing hour dimming the hope that had clung so fiercely to Silverton's hearts. The sun, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock the Hayes family, its warmth unable to thaw the cold dread that had settled in their home. James and Eleanor, their faces etched with sleepless worry, sat by the phone, which remained stubbornly silent. The community, desperate for answers, saw their fear turn to palpable anxiety. No longer was it merely about finding Marcus, it was about understanding the monstrous act that had shattered their illusion of safety. Police, with no significant breakthroughs, made another public appeal, their voices strained with a weariness that mirrored the town's. "We have no major developments," Chief Miller announced, his expression grim, but the Hayes family, with the help of their church and generous anonymous donors, has raised a $5,000 reward for any information. Then, a new voice cut through the despair. An anonymous caller, prompted by the local news broadcast, directed police to Skyline Drive, a winding road about 5 miles south of where Marcus's car had been found. Officers raced to the location, their hearts thudding with a renewed, grim hope. There, hanging from a barbed wire fence post, was a green and gold Letterman jacket. Its discovery sent a jolt of recognition through the officers. Stitched in white cursive over the heart was the name Sarah. It was Sarah's jacket, Marcus's comforting symbol of their love, now discarded like a forgotten secret. State troopers confirmed it hadn't been there the day before. Someone had intentionally placed it, or perhaps thrown it from a passing car. This wasn't just a clue, it was a defiant message, a chilling piece of Marcus's story now left for the world to find. The revelation deepened the mystery, tugging the investigation toward Kevin Johnson, the deceptive ex-boyfriend. But a month passed. The porch light at the Hayes home continued its lonely vigil, a single, unwavering flame against the encroaching darkness. "He'll come home, James," Eleanor would whisper each night, her voice thin with exhaustion. "He has to." Then, on November 20th, 1988, 37 days after Marcus vanished, Silverton was plunged into a new, unimaginable horror. A man and his 10-year-old son, Kyle, were hunting in the woods just off Willamette Bluffs Road, not far from where the car had been found. Kyle, wandering along the reedy edge of a creek, spotted something dark, partially submerged. As he drew closer, his childish curiosity turned to a scream that tore through the serene afternoon. It was a shoe, attached to a foot, attached to a body. Heavy stones and branches were piled on its back, struggling to hold it beneath the surface. Kyle, paralyzed by the sight, stumbled back to his father, pointing a trembling finger. "Daddy," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "There's a person in the water." Dive team members arrived, their grim faces reflected in the dark water. They carefully retrieved the body, placing it onto a stretcher, the air heavy with unspoken grief. It was a young man, fully clothed in blue jeans and a sweatshirt, consistent with Marcus's description. On his wrist was a simple watch Sarah had given him for his birthday. There was no longer any room for doubt. It was Marcus. Dental records and an autopsy would soon confirm the devastating truth, but the community already knew. Marcus, the bright, ambitious young man with dreams of becoming an engineer, had been murdered, his body found in the murky depths of a creek. Silverton's illusion of safety was shattered forever. The official confirmation of Marcus Hayes's identity, delivered with agonizing certainty by dental records and autopsy, plunged Silverton into a collective grief and fear it had never known. The illusion was shattered. Marcus Hayes, the quiet, ambitious young man who embodied the town's hopes, was not just missing, he was gone, brutally murdered. The autopsy revealed the grim truth of his final moments: asphyxiation. He had been strangled with bare hands, a desperate, intimate act of violence. While no other overt injuries marked his body, investigators theorized he might have been struck, perhaps rendered unconscious, before his breath was stolen. "This wasn't a random act," Chief Miller murmured to Deputy Reed, his voice heavy. "This was personal. Passionate." Silverton, a town that had rarely seen a homicide, struggled to comprehend who among them could commit such a monstrous act against a young man so universally liked, so focused on building his future. For James and Eleanor, the world had fractured. The funeral, held on November 25th at the Silverton Community Church, was a sea of solemn faces. Hundreds came, their sorrow a palpable hum beneath the heavy organ music. Plainclothes police officers moved discreetly among the mourners, their eyes scanning, searching for any flicker of suspicious behavior. They believed the killer was not a stranger, but someone Marcus knew, someone he might have trusted enough to willingly join at the secluded spot where his car was later found. Their gaze lingered on two people, David Miller, who sat near the back, his expression unreadable, and Kevin Johnson, who stood awkwardly outside the church doors, refusing to come in. 6 weeks after Marcus's disappearance, as the raw edges of grief began to harden into a dull ache, the investigation, which had briefly stalled, now fixated on Kevin Johnson. He was, after all, the previously undisclosed third person whose polygraph test had shown clear signs of deception. The detective's instincts, which had quietly regarded him with suspicion, now sharpened. Kevin, a man whose volatile relationship with Sarah had left a trail of public arguments and broken objects, was a perfect fit for their crime of passion theory. He had the temper, and he had the motive, jealousy. The discovery of Sarah's Letterman jacket, discarded on a fence post on Skyline Drive, a road known to be part of Kevin's regular cruise route, felt like a taunt. Detectives brought him in again. This time, the kid gloves were off. "Where were you on October 14th, Kevin?" Chief Miller asked, his voice flat. Kevin, slouched in the interrogation room chair, bristled. "I told you. I was driving around. Alone." "Your polygraph says you're lying," Reed interjected. "We found the jacket, Kevin. On your route. You hated him, didn't you? Hated that he was with Sarah." Kevin shot up from his chair, his face crimson. "I didn't touch him. You think I'm stupid enough to kill a guy and dump his jacket on a road everyone knows I drive? It's a setup." His alibi was air-thin, his denials laced with the very rage that made him such a compelling suspect. But rage wasn't evidence. They had nothing physical. Just as the case against Kevin seemed to be solidifying into a frustrating, circumstantial dead end, a new, shocking lead emerged. While re-interviewing Marcus's family, a detective spoke with his younger sister, Maya. Trying to find any reason Marcus might have been on that desolate road, the detective asked if he had any secrets, any troubles. Maya hesitated, tears welling. "He wasn't in trouble," she whispered, "but he was scared." "About Leon." "Leon, Marcus's older brother." "What about Leon?" Maya explained that a few weeks before he vanished, Marcus had overheard a frantic phone call. Leon, who worked a construction job in Portland, was in serious trouble. He owed money, a lot of it, to dangerous people. Marcus confronted him, Maya said. He was terrified Leon would lose everything, or get hurt. He was going to tell our parents. This was the secret. This was the dark undercurrent no one had seen. The investigation pivoted, hard. Suddenly, the crime of passion theory competed with something far more sinister, a professional hit. The two men seen arguing with Marcus at the diner? They weren't David or Kevin. They were enforcers. Marcus, the good son, had threatened to expose his brother, and in doing so, had interfered with a dangerous criminal enterprise. The staged car, the lack of a struggle, it all made a different, colder kind of sense. This wasn't a jealous ex, this was a silencing. Detectives brought Leon Hayes in. His grief, so raw at the funeral, was now compounded by shame. He collapsed in the interrogation room, confessing he owed over $10,000 to a loan sharking operation based in Portland. "I begged Marcus to stay out of it," Leon wept. "I told him they were dangerous. He just wanted to help. He said he was going to try and talk to them for me." This revelation was devastating. Marcus hadn't been lured to his death by a rival, he had walked into it, trying to save his brother. The focus shifted from Silverton to Portland. Detectives, working with the Portland PD, began digging into the loan sharking ring. They identified the two men who ran it, both with long, violent rap sheets. This was it. This had to be it. The detectives, along with a Portland SWAT team, executed a no-knock warrant on the loan sharks' headquarters. But the men they found inside weren't panicked thugs, they were cold, calculating businessmen, flanked by lawyers. They had been tipped off, or perhaps, they had just been too smart. Their alibis for October 14th were ironclad, verified by a dozen witnesses at a high-stakes poker game. They admitted Leon owed them money. "A lot of guys owe us money," one of them sneered. "It's bad for business to start killing their kid brothers. Creates a mess. We would have just broken his legs." This wasn't us. They were telling the truth. Their operation was brutal, but Marcus's murder didn't fit their methods. It was too sloppy, too personal. The professional hit theory, which had seemed so certain, evaporated, leaving only cold air. The chilling, yet wildly inconsistent, lead of the gambling debt had sent a ripple of both terror and a strange, desperate hope through the Hayes family. Could it be that this was an outside evil, not something born from their own community? But with that theory now debunked, the investigation found itself back where it started, the cold files on Marcus Hayes staring back with renewed, frustrating emptiness. The focus inevitably, and grimly, returned to Kevin Johnson. 5 long months had passed since Marcus's murder, each a testament to the slow, relentless grind of an investigation devoid of easy answers. But detectives now felt they had painstakingly gathered enough circumstantial evidence to present to a grand jury. The weight of his shifting alibis, his deceptive polygraph results, and the haunting, symbolic placement of the Letterman jacket seemed undeniable. The grand jury, however, disagreed. The prosecutor, Robert Beckman, reviewed the mountain of evidence and concluded there was simply not enough. A failed polygraph and a jacket on a public road isn't enough to convict, Beckman stated, his voice weary. We have no physical evidence. No DNA, no fibers, no murder weapon. Nothing linking Johnson to the car or the body. We only get one shot at this. We can't take it if we're not sure we can win. To the disbelief of many in Silverton, Kevin Johnson remained a free man, though he was now a pariah, tried and convicted in the court of public opinion. James and Eleanor Hayes, though their hearts ached for justice, were adrift. The police had presented them with 2 powerful theories, and both had dissolved. The monster was still out there, and they were no closer to knowing his face. For the Silverton police, this was a devastating blow. The initial shock of the failed indictment gave way to a weary acceptance. The case, once again, went cold, receding into the records room, another unsolved mystery in a town that had hoped to finally lay its ghost to rest. Years bled into over a decade. The silence grew heavier. But for James and Eleanor, and for Sarah, Marcus was never forgotten. His dreams, his quiet laugh, his desire to build a better future, these memories fueled a quiet, unyielding fire, a promise to keep his story alive. They refused to let Marcus Hayes fade into obscurity, even as the real killer, the friend who had passed a polygraph, watched from the shadows, his secret held tight. For 15 agonizing years, Marcus Hayes's case remained a ghost in the annals of Silverton, a cold file gathering dust, a wound that refused to heal. For his family, the porch light at the Hayes home, a defiant beacon against the decades of darkness, still burned each night, a silent, stubborn vow. James and Eleanor, their hair now flecked with gray, continued to share Marcus's story with anyone who would listen, ensuring his quiet, ambitious memory didn't fade into the background noise of time. They knew, with a certainty that transcended evidence, that somewhere, the truth still breathed, suffocating under the weight of a secret. The town had largely settled on its own narrative. Kevin Johnson, the angry ex-boyfriend, had gotten away with it. He had long since left Silverton, but his guilt was an accepted, if unproven, fact. Then, in May 2003, a phone call sliced through the silence of those forgotten years. A man named Chad Thompson, his voice nervous and cracking, called the Silverton Police Department, asking for the detective in charge of cold cases. I have information, he stammered, about the Marcus Hayes murder from '88. Detective Al Williamson, who had inherited the dusty file, agreed to meet him. Chad, now a 38-year-old accountant living in Portland, sat in the sterile interview room, visibly trembling. I lied, he said, the words rushing out. We all lied. There was no study group. Williamson leaned forward, his heart quickening. Who lied, Chad? Me. The others. David. David Miller made us do it. For 15 years, Chad had been haunted. He and David were no longer friends, hadn't been for over a decade, but the secret had eaten away at him, destroying his marriage, fueling his nightmares. Now, with a new child of his own, he could no longer live with what he knew. He unburdened himself of 2 decades of torment. On the afternoon of October 14, 1988, David Miller, consumed by his long-standing, sick obsession with Sarah, had called him. I'm going to finally tell him, David had said, his voice buzzing with a strange energy. I'm going to tell Marcus to leave her alone. She deserves me. Chad, busy with his own life, had brushed him off. That's a stupid idea, man. Just leave it. That night, around 10 p.m., David called him again, but this time, he was hysterical, sobbing, incoherent. I did it, he cried. I did it. I think I killed him. I killed Marcus. Chad, terrified, drove to a deserted logging road to meet him. David was standing by his car, his clothes muddy, his hands shaking. He confessed everything. He had gone to the diner at 7 p.m. to confront Marcus. He pleaded, cajoled, begged Marcus to break up with Sarah, telling him he didn't deserve her. Marcus, confused and then annoyed, had finally just laughed in his face. You're crazy, David, Marcus had said, turning to walk away. Just stay away from us. It was then that David's carefully constructed facade shattered. He snapped. He grabbed Marcus from behind, tackling him to the ground. He punched him, and then, in a blind rage, climbed atop him, his hands closing around his throat. Stop, you're going to kill him, Chad whispered in the interview room, repeating the words David had confessed. But David's reply that night had been cold, distant. It was too late, he'd said. If I can't have her, nobody can. The confession, delivered with chilling precision, ripped through the interview room. Williamson took meticulous notes, his mind racing, fitting the pieces. The ring in the glove box, David's. The mud on the floor mat, from David's boots. The staged car. Chad confirmed it all. Panicked, David had forced Chad to help him. David put Marcus's body in the trunk of his own car. Then, David drove Marcus's Toyota to Willamette Bluffs Road, with Chad following. They staged the breakdown, popping the hood, leaving the wallet and keys. Then they drove to the creek. He made me help carry him, Chad wept, his body shaking. He was so heavy. We put stones on him, from the creek bed, to hold him down. David's plan was meticulous, even in his panic. He knew Kevin Johnson was the perfect fall guy. Days later, David, acting alone, took Sarah's Letterman jacket, which he'd stolen from Marcus's car that night, and deliberately planted it on Skyline Drive, a road he knew Kevin frequented, a road he knew police would connect to him. Chad's testimony was explosive, but it was still just one man's word, a co-conspirator's confession, 15 years later. It was insufficient for an arrest without corroboration. We need him to say it, Williamson said, his voice firm but compassionate. We need David to confess. To you. Chad, desperate for any kind of absolution, agreed. The legal hurdles were immense, but Chief Prosecutor Elaine Norris, who had taken over from Beckman, saw the path. She immediately approved an immunity deal for Chad Thompson for his role as an accessory after the fact, contingent on his full cooperation. The trap was set. In July 2003, 15 years after Marcus's murder, Chad, his heart hammering against his ribs, a wire taped to his chest, called David Miller. He arranged a meeting at a park halfway between Silverton and Portland, under the guise of wanting to clear the air after years of silence. David, now a married father of two, a seemingly normal suburban dad, agreed, his voice wary. They met on a park bench. The air was thick with unspoken history. Chad, his voice expertly guided by detectives listening in, started slow. I've been thinking a lot, David, about that night. David tensed. What night? That was a long time ago. The night with Marcus, Chad pushed, his voice trembling for real this time. The police, they're asking questions again. They're digging up old cold cases. David's face visibly paled. His hand instinctively gripped the bench. They've got nothing. They had nothing then, they have nothing now. I don't know, man, Chad said, I'm scared. They know about Kevin, but, what if they find out about us? About what we did? At the creek? David's carefully constructed world began to implode. He leaned in, his voice a low, vicious whisper, forgetting the open air, forgetting everything but the secret that had defined his life. "You need to shut up," he hissed. "Nobody knows. Nobody ever will. I did what I had to do." He laughed at me. He laughed. He thought he was so much better than me, but he wasn't. I took him out. I put him in the water. I framed that idiot Kevin. I thought of everything. "The jacket," Chad whispered. "That was smart." "Of course it was smart," David sneered, a flicker of that 19-year-old's rage in his eyes. "I'm smarter than all of them." They looked right at me, and they saw nothing. "You just need to keep your mouth shut. We have everything we need," Williamson's voice said in the listening van. As David stood up to leave, two plainclothes detectives stepped out from behind a stand of trees. "David Miller," one said, "you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Hayes." David's face, drained of all color, was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His carefully constructed world had just been obliterated. He was taken into custody. At the Silverton Police Department, Detectives Williamson and Reed brought David Miller into an interview room. Williamson placed a small tape recorder on the table between them. "We know what happened on Willamette Bluffs Road, David. We know about the creek. Chad told us everything." David leaned back, his gaze unwavering, trying to grasp for that old defiance. "Chad's a liar. He's trying to save his own skin." Williamson pressed play. David's own voice filled the room, cold, bragging, confessing. "I'm smarter than all of them. I put him in the water." David slammed his hand on the table. "I want a lawyer. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer present." Williamson met his gaze. "You've had 15 years to tell us, David. 15 years for Marcus's family. A lawyer won't change what you said. Or what you did." The door clicked shut, leaving him alone in the sterile room, the silence amplified by the enormity of the truth now closing in. David Miller's trial began on November 7, 2004. The small Marion County courthouse was overwhelmed by media and spectators. Chief Prosecutor Elaine Norris methodically presented Chad Thompson's testimony, his words painting a horrifying picture of obsession and rage. Then, she played the tape. The courtroom fell silent, listening to David's own voice seal his fate. She recontextualized the old evidence, the ring in the glove box, a token of obsession, the staged car, a deliberate act of deception, the Letterman jacket, a calculated move to frame an innocent man. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. The courtroom held its breath. "Guilty." A collective gasp, then quiet, shuddering sobs erupted from the Hayes family. James and Eleanor clutched each other, tears of relief and sorrow finally flowing after 16 agonizing years. On December 19, David Miller was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 25 years. During the victim impact statements, Eleanor Hayes, her voice steady but laced with decades of pain, addressed the court. Marcus was so full of life. He wanted to build things, to make the world better. David Miller stole that. He stole his future, and he stole our peace. He sat in our church. He volunteered for the search. He was not a monster in the shadows. He was the friend we knew. Justice, though agonizingly delayed, had finally arrived for Marcus Hayes. The Hayes family, now able to grieve with a clearer truth, established the Marcus Hayes Memorial Scholarship Fund, awarding it to a community college student pursuing engineering each year, a living tribute to the life he might have lived. Silverton, the quiet town once impervious to the brutal realities of the outside world, was irrevocably changed. The doors there aren't left unlocked anymore. Marcus Hayes' story taught them that evil can reside anywhere, not in the form of a violent ex-boyfriend or a shadowy loan shark, but just beneath the surface of a seemingly normal life. That night, for the first time in 15 years, James Hayes walked onto his porch, looked up at the sky, and turned the porch light off. Marcus was finally home.